In America's new war, the investigation is moving forward with word this hour that 2 new arrest warrants have been issued for material witnesses sought in connection with the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington. Elsewhere, federal transportation officials are considering a plan that would seriously restrict air traffic in and out of Reagan National Airport, which is just outside Washington. It is the only airport still closed after Tuesday's attacks. President Bush is back at the White House after meetings this weekend with his national security team at Camp David. Administration officials say more clues point to the involvement of alleged terror mastermind Osama bin Laden in the deadly attacks, even though bin Laden issued a statement today denying he was involved. The president has confirmed that he gave the go-ahead to the military to shoot down any unauthorized commercial jets if they approach the Capitol and the White House during the terror attacks. Search and rescue efforts continue at Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan. Mayor Rudy Giuliani has revised the number of missing at the World Trade Center attack to 5,097. He says that the rescue operation will continue until all hope is gone. Wolf?
Joey, the Bush administration is expressing its thanks to governments neighboring Afghanistan for their cooperation, including the Pakistani government, which will ask Afghanistan's ruling Taliban to hand over Osama bin Laden.
We will continue to work with Pakistan and India. We will work with Russia. We will work with the nations that one would have thought a couple of years ago would have been impossible to work with, to bring people to justice, but more than that, to win the war on against terrorist activity.
The key here to keep in mind is that what we're asking nations to do, and which the PACs have clearly made a decision to do, is we're asking nations to step up and be counted. They're going to have to decide. Are they going to stand with the United States and believe in freedom and democracy and civilization, or are they going to stand with the terrorists and the barbarians, if you will? And it's a fairly clear-cut choice, and I'm delighted to see that Pakistan has, in fact, stepped up to the task.
This is going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way we go about our daily life here in the United States. It's going to require a greater emphasis on homeland defense, so we can defend ourselves against those who, notwithstanding our best efforts overseas, are still trying to get in to the country to hurt us. And so we should see this as a long-term campaign and do apply decisive force to it. And that force isn't just military force. It's all the elements of national power that are at our disposal.
In New York, the Afghan ambassador to the United Nations, who represents the Northern Alliance, the anti-Taliban movement in Afghanistan, says his group would make 15,000 troops available for any attack on Taliban-held parts of Afghanistan. And as we told you earlier, 2 new arrest warrants have been issued today in connection with the attacks. And authorities searched apartments in Florida and New Jersey believed to be tied to the hijackers or their accomplices. The Bush administration says the clues continue to point toward Osama bin Laden. CNN's Mike Betcher brings us up to date on the investigation once again. Mike, give us the latest.
Well, Wolf, that late word came from CNN Justice correspondent Kelly Arena. She says that the warrants are sealed and the people named are not named publicly by the Justice Department. But as well, this makes the total four people on the material witness list, so that is expanding. Of course, Osama bin Laden remains #1 on the list, but investigators are working in overdrive trying to fill out the middle and the bottom part of that list. For example, in Delray Beach, Florida, FBI agents descended on an apartment there with 12 agents and began collecting evidence early this afternoon. They went in with boxes and extension cords and came out with black bags where they loaded the evidence into the back of that trailer and drove off. That apartment, according to authorities, was used by Saeed Al-Gandhi and Ahmed Al-Zami of the who were on board the United Airlines flight that crashed into Pennsylvania. Those two are part of the 19 who were on board those aircraft that crashed both in Pennsylvania, in Washington, and in New York. As well, in New Jersey, another apartment was investigated by FBI agents. This one, evidence was taken out of, which investigators say was very useful. That apartment was apparently used by 2 men who were arrested in Fort Worth, Texas, Ayub Ali Khan and Mohammed Jawed Azmath. These two men were pulled off a train in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, apparently on Tuesday, according to investigators, they were on a flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Antonio. That flight was diverted to St. Louis. They had gotten on a train in St. Louis and were on their way to San Antonio when they were picked up. They had box cutting knives and $5,000 in cash, and eyewitnesses on the plane who used their cell phones to call in before those aircraft crashed reported that box cutting knives were used by some of the hijackers on board those aircraft. So authorities are very interested in these two men. They are actually still being detained on INS charges and are not being named as material witnesses, but certainly the list is growing. Wolf.
And Mike, tell us if any of these individuals who have been detained are cooperating or talking to federal law enforcement authorities.
Well, Wolf, there's a list of 25 who are being detained under INS regulations because they were here illegally. We're told many of those people are providing useful information. And what may happen is, as happens in many of these cases, some of these people might graduate from material witnesses to actual conspirators. And we should explain a material witness is someone who has vital information that can be used in the case and is also perhaps a flight risk. So we'll continue to monitor this. Keeps changing throughout the day and night as they go to more apartments and gather more evidence.
And we learned earlier and tell our viewers that there was some sort of connection between the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen and the arrests that are now, at least the detainees who are now being picked up. What was that connection between the hijacking this week and the USS Cole?
Well, before the USS Cole was bombed, apparently intelligence agents in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, had a surveillance going on a person they thought or they knew to be a member of bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. Now, two of the hijackers in this Tuesday's attack were seen, at least one of them was seen meeting with this person on videotape. Then they discovered that this man had another accomplice. It turns out that those two people were two of the hijackers, and that information had been passed on to the FBI, but the FBI had not a good idea exactly where these people were, and they'd launched a nationwide search. And of course, the attacks in New York and Washington occurred before they could actually get to them.
Mike Boettcher trying to follow all the threads of these various investigations. Thank you very much. Joey?
Well, as you may have heard earlier, President Bush is encouraging people across the country to go to work and go about their normal business tomorrow. That same message is being underlined, especially for the people of New York, by Governor George Pataki and Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
The people of London went through this during the Battle of Britain. And in fact, it was even different in the sense that they were being bombed every day. And what they did was they took precautions, they were careful, they had bomb shelters, they had hospitals, but they went about their lives and they didn't let the Nazi assault stop their way of life. And we're not under consistent bombardment in any way. We've had a tremendous attack, worse actually than any single attack during the Battle of Britain. But there's that fear that something like that can happen again. It should not stop us from going about our way of life.
We are a spirited and strong people, and we're not going to simply leave a crater where we had a symbol of New York. We're working right now. Monday, the New York Stock Exchange will reopen, the Mercantile Exchange will reopen, the NASDAQ will reopen. What the form of the rebuilding will take, no one can say. It's too soon. But New Yorkers will rebuild. We will continue to be the world financial capital. We will continue to have confidence in the unity, the spirit, the strength of New Yorkers, coupled with the tremendous help from people around the country, are going to allow us not just to get through this. We're going to come through this, and we're going to be stronger.
Adding to the chorus of the mayor and the governor, the president, and his message today: when you go to work tomorrow, be alert, but also know that the federal, state, and local governments are being alert as well on your behalf. More on the mood of the people of New York City and the latest on the search and rescue operation. Up there for that, we check in with CNN's Gary Tuchman. Gary.
Hello to you, Joey. 130 hours have now gone by since these terrifying incidents, and the hopes of finding survivors are getting lower and lower. No one has been found alive in the rubble since early Wednesday morning. The search does continue, but it really isn't going so well right now. Fires continue to burn behind me. The smoke continues to rise as New Yorkers get ready to go back to work tomorrow, including to work on Wall Street. And lots of things will have changed in the city tomorrow as far as getting to Wall Street. Many of the streets will still be closed to cars. They're instituting a ferry service between Manhattan and Brooklyn. It's the first time in decades.
All right, we have just lost Gary Tuchman, our connection to him in Lower Manhattan, but we'll try to return to him as soon as we are able to reconnect that line to Gary Tuchman. Meantime, watching the events unfold from across the Hudson River is one of Manhattan's neighbors. For decades, this New Jersey town has stood in the shadows of the World Trade Center. But as CNN's Richard Roth tells us, you don't have to be in the middle of the debris to feel New York City's sorrow.
They were the big neighbors next door, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, the star attraction for skyline gazers over in Jersey City, New Jersey, just across the Hudson River. Now the cloud of smoke is all that's left.
The view, that doesn't even really look like New York. It doesn't look like New York without the towers.
Long lenses poke through the canyons to see towers rubble. A photo collector named Butch came to the water's edge to revive some recent memories.
This is life the way we knew it and the way it should be.
Well, I'll stop over there in about 10 minutes and talk to them, see what they're going to do.
Jersey City was a good neighbor during the catastrophe. This is where ferries with the injured and scared fled to from Manhattan in a Dunkirk-style escape.
A lot of them were New Yorkers. The only way out of that ring of fire was this way.
Jersey City is connected to the trade towers in another, less sentimental way. It was at this mosque that Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman preached. Several followers were plotters of the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Just steps away from the same mosque on Saturday at this apartment building, the FBI and other federal agencies seized a man billed as a material witness in the destruction of the Trade Center. A neighbor looked through his peephole.
I saw the people, the SWAT team, run up the stairs and, like covering each other and just making sure that they've got it, and they're shouting, "Open up, it's the police, it's the FBI."
There's a large Muslim community in Jersey City, living with new arrivals from all over the globe.
One of the great things about Jersey City, it's culturally diverse. You have people from all walks of life here, and unfortunately some people have tried to turn that around and make it maybe a place where they think they could hide out.
Since the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993, the multicultural mix of Jersey City has expanded even further, helped by an economic boom. Now there's unity in condemning the attack.
Everybody do this, it's not. Even if it's Muslim, it's got to be bad Muslim.
These people is not Muslim.
It's not Muslim.
Muslim never kill anybody. Muslim is never kill anybody.
But as the smoke clears on the city that's no longer in the shadow of the towers, a little bit of darkness remains. Richard Roth, CNN, Jersey City, New Jersey.
Rejoining us now from Lower Manhattan is CNN's Gary Tuchman. Gary, I'm glad to see that we have reconnected the line to you. Before we lost you a little bit earlier, I think you were talking about getting Wall Street back to work and how literally difficult it will be for Wall Street's workers to get back to work.
Joey, it's very difficult to get to Wall Street even on a good day. It's a very small area. Tens of thousands of people come down here, so many people are wondering how it will work out. The plan right now, they've put ferry service into place between Brooklyn and Manhattan. There hasn't been a ferry between these two boroughs for decades. This will be the first time they've done that since the 1950s. And also you have to keep in mind, many of the subway stations here in New York City, and New York has the largest subway system in the United States, are shut down, perhaps some permanently, because a couple of subway stations are under the World Trade Center. So it will be very difficult, but the city says it will be doing it. We want to update the number again. Right now, 5,097 people are still missing. The search continues for survivors, but no one has been found since Wednesday morning. A short time ago, we talked with a police officer with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey who was in World Trade Center Tower number 2 when the explosion happened. He was on the 4th floor. He was a canine officer. His dog is missing, but he survived it.
Well, seeing there wasn't much, we were covering up the civilian, Josephine Harris. We were just on the ground, hearing it sounded like a rushing locomotive or an avalanche coming at us. And feeling, it was the feeling that I was going to die. That's the only thing I could think at the time. And And it went from